Imagine a young captain, just 36 years old, stepping into one of the toughest jobs on the continent, leading a country drowning in problems, surrounded by leaders clinging to power like it's their birthright. That's Captain Ibrahim Traoré of Burkina Faso. But he's not your usual president. No flashy cars, no golden palaces, no private jets. Just a regular guy driving a beat-up Toyota pickup and living on the same paycheck he got as a soldier, around $1,000 a month. Crazy, right? Especially when you think about the usual story in Africa: leaders flying first class while kids can't afford school books, presidents building mansions while hospitals run out of medicine. But Traoré, he's flipping the script. Instead of grabbing more for himself, he's giving everything he's got to rebuild his country. He's not chasing luxury, he's chasing change. When he took over in 2022, it wasn't through some long campaign or fancy promises. It was during a moment of frustration. People were fed up. The government had failed them, and Traoré stepped in. Since then, he's been doing something rare: leading with honesty. Other leaders hoard millions, some even billions, hidden bank accounts, luxury homes overseas, private islands. But Traoré, he's got none of that. No secret stash, no luxury watches, no gold-plated bathrooms. What he does have is something money can't buy: respect. His power doesn't come from fear, it comes from trust. Not because he says the right things, but because he does the right things. We would love to take a second to ask you a question. Would you want a man like Ibrahim Traoré to be the president of your country? Let us know what you think in the comments section below. In many parts of Africa, when the president drives by, it's like a royal parade. Flashy cars, dark windows, police escorts blocking traffic, sirens screaming louder than the people's cries for help. You'll see them cruising in blacked-out Mercedes, bulletproof SUVs, or some shiny, custom-made luxury car that looks like it belongs in a music video, not on the streets of a struggling nation. Now picture this. In the middle of all that noise and glitter, a dusty old Toyota pickup rolls by. No tinted windows, no army of bodyguards. Just one man sitting in the front seat like any regular person heading to work. That's Captain Ibrahim Traoré in Burkina Faso. He doesn't hide behind walls or behind glass. He doesn't need a palace to feel powerful. He rides in the kind of truck his soldiers use, sometimes even hopping into military vehicles meant for the front lines. Why? Because he's not pretending to be one of the people. He is one of the people. To folks who've spent their whole lives watching presidents speed by in motorcades, longer than a line for clean water, that old Toyota isn't just a truck. It's a message, a loud one. It says leadership isn't about being untouchable. It's about being present. But now look around the continent. Really look. Where are the billions of dollars that were meant for hospitals, schools, and clean water? Gone. Vanished. Swallowed by people who call themselves leaders but live like kings. In Nigeria, someone who used to be a governor lounges in a mansion worth $50 million, while babies die in clinics that don't even have electricity. In Kenya, a private helicopter takes off in the middle of a flood, flying high above families crying for help down below. Elsewhere, a president's son shows off a car worth more than some villages have seen in government support in 20 years. Meanwhile, his people are hungry, eating whatever they can find just to survive. From posh mansions in capital cities to secret bank accounts overseas, the story stays the same. The money meant to build Africa has been stolen to decorate private lives. But now, something's shifting. Burkina Faso is showing the rest of the continent that Africa doesn't have to keep begging, borrowing, or bending to anyone. It's proving we can stand on our own feet, take back what's ours, and write a new story. One we actually want to live in. But here's the big question. Will the rest of Africa follow? Let's be real. Africa is rich. Rich in oil, gold, diamonds, land, talent, and ideas. But the people, most are still struggling to afford food, medicine, and school fees. Why? Because the money doesn't stay here. It doesn't build homes or hospitals. It disappears into the hands of the powerful. We've seen it. A leader in East Africa with a garage so stuffed with luxury cars, it looks more like a millionaire's showroom than the home of a public servant. One of his cars could pay for hundreds of schools. A president in the West who made his fortune in oil, now flying around in private jets that cost more than his entire country's hospital system. And then there's a ruler in the middle of Africa who flies to Europe to celebrate his birthday with gold-plated cake and fireworks, while children back home drink dirty water just to survive. Let's call it what it is. These men aren't heroes, they're not visionaries, they're not even leaders. They're scavengers, feeding off the hopes of their people. Their expensive watches shine while our teachers go unpaid. Their imported champagne flows while mothers cry over empty dinner pots. Their tailor-made suits are stitched from the shattered dreams of an entire generation. And they have the nerve to act like they care. But behind the smiles, they're just puppets, dancing to tunes played in foreign capitals. They live in palaces guarded by men with guns, while the people live in slums guarded by nothing but prayers. But somewhere far from all the glitz and gold, a quiet storm is building. Captain Ibrahim Traoré didn't wait for permission to lead. He didn't need a crown. In 2022, during a time of chaos and fear, he stepped up. Not to rule, but to rebuild. He walked into a nation broken by war, drained by corruption, and ignored by the world. And instead of following the same old script, he ripped it up. He's not playing their game, he's writing new rules. And across the continent, people are starting to pay attention. From the bustling streets of Dakar to the crowded neighbourhoods of Nairobi. When Captain Ibrahim Traoré stepped up to lead Burkina Faso, it wasn't just about taking over a job. It was a loud wake-up call. The people were tired. Tired of broken promises. Tired of being left unprotected. And tired of watching their country's riches benefit everyone but them. The man before him, Paul-Henri Damiba, was pushed out not just because he lost control, but because folks had lost hope. The country needed more than speeches. It needed someone with a plan and the guts to carry it out. Traore, a young captain who'd already made a name for himself on the battlefield, didn't come in talking about handshakes with world powers or loans with strings attached. He came in talking about something different, taking care of home first. And while other African presidents are busy hopping on planes to beg for loans or cut sketchy deals with big foreign companies, Traore has been doing something rare, using Burkina Faso's own money to build Burkina Faso. Instead of borrowing millions with crazy interest rates, he spent $20 million of the country's own cash to buy machines that help farmers, things like tractors, shovels and earth movers. Real stuff. Useful stuff. That may not sound flashy, but for a country where most people depend on farming to survive, it's a big deal. It means they can grow more food, earn more money, and depend less on imported grains or outside help. And guess what? In 2024, Burkina Faso hit a record. It produced almost 6 million tonnes of cereal. That's not just numbers on a chart, that's kids with food in their bellies. That's families sleeping better at night, knowing there's enough to eat. Now compare that to what we see elsewhere. Some presidents are out there shaking hands in big Western cities, begging for loans they'll never repay. The money comes in, disappears into private bank accounts, and the people are left worse off than before. Roads still broken, hospitals still empty, farms still dry, but not Traore. He's laying bricks while others are making excuses. He's showing what's possible when a country actually uses its money to help its own people, instead of letting it leak into someone else's pockets. Social media lit up when the news dropped. One user summed it up perfectly. While African leaders are busy begging for loans they'll steal, Traore just bought $20 million worth of farming equipment, paid in full. That one sentence hit like a slap. It wasn't just praise, it was a shot at the corrupt elites watching nervously from their marble offices. And that's not all. Let's talk about gold, Burkina Faso's shiny treasure buried deep in its soil. For years, this gold has been dug up by big companies from places like France, Canada, Russia, and Australia. They've gotten rich. Burkina Faso, not so much. The people barely saw a slice of the pie. But Traore, he's flipping the script. He's moving to take control of the gold industry. That means no more one-sided deals. No more outsiders walking off with bags of gold, while the locals get left in the dust. He even set up a government-owned gold refinery. That's huge. It means Burkina Faso can process its own gold, keep more of the profits, and stop being treated like someone else's backyard mine. This small West African country is standing up and saying loud and clear, our resources belong to us, not to foreign companies, not to wealthy outsiders, not to anyone who's been taking and giving nothing back. And if this new path works, if Burkina Faso can truly take back control of its gold, its farms, and its future, it might just inspire others to do the same. Countries like Congo and Zimbabwe, rich in minerals but poor in returns, could start asking tougher questions. Why are outsiders still walking off with Africa's riches while locals stay stuck in poverty? But Captain Ibrahim Traoré isn't stopping with gold. He's thinking bigger. Instead of relying on foreign countries to sell Burkina Faso expensive medicines, he wants to build the factories to make those medicines at home. That means pills made in Ouagadougou, not shipped in from overseas with high prices and hidden strings attached. No more waiting on foreign aid. No more begging for life-saving drugs. No more being stuck in someone else's system. This kind of plan, it's the stuff the late Thomas Sankara used to dream about. A fully independent Africa, building what it needs, creating its own future. Traoré seems determined to carry that vision forward. Need proof? His government is building a huge national hospital with 500 beds. While other presidents are crying over frozen health aid from abroad, Traoré is quietly laying bricks. He's not tweeting for sympathy, he's pouring concrete, and people are noticing. One post online put it plainly: Traoré isn't begging because he's not waiting to be rescued. But this shift in Burkina Faso isn't just making waves, it's shaking the very ground that some African elites have been standing on for decades. The old way of doing things? Leaders living large while the people scrape by, cozying up to former colonial powers, hiding money in secret bank accounts, handing over land and mines like party favours. That model is being challenged, and hard. Traoré has thrown out more than old habits. He's removed French as an official language. He's kicked out diplomats he accused of stirring up trouble. He's renamed streets that once honoured colonial figures. Even the old-style curly white court wigs, symbols of colonial rule, are gone. And instead of running to Western powers for approval, he's linking arms with neighbours like Mali and Niger to form something new, the Alliance of Sahel States, or AES. Together, they're saying no to being told what to do, and yes to making decisions for themselves. Online, Traoré is being called a real son of Africa, not because he gives fancy speeches, but because he walks the walk. He's taken on powerful interests without blinking. He's imagining a future where Africa doesn't wait for permission, it simply moves forward. Sure, some stories flying around, like Burkina Faso, wiping out all its foreign debt, might be a stretch. Experts say the country still owes over $10 billion. But here's what really matters. People are ready for change. They want leaders who care more about building schools than building their bank accounts. Leaders who fix roads, not just riding convoys. Leaders who don't grab power to enjoy the perks, but use it to lift their people up. Captain Ibrahim Traoré isn't playing by the old rules. While other leaders chase handouts and sign deals that give away their country's resources, he's saying no more. His message: Africa doesn't need to keep asking for a seat at the table. We can build our own. He's betting on local farming, local medicine, and full control over his country's gold. And with every move he makes, he's proving a bold idea that Africa can stand tall, make its own stuff, and decide its own future. Meanwhile, across the continent, many of the people in charge are still stuck in the same old game. Lavish homes, secret bank accounts, private jets. And while they live large, regular folks are stuck waiting in line for clean water or walking miles to see a doctor. That's not leadership, that's betrayal. But things are shifting. There's a new energy, a different kind of fire catching on. And it's coming from Traoré's Burkina Faso. This young captain didn't just say no to the usual powerful institutions, the IMF, the World Bank, and even France's influence. He stood his ground. He's connected with a whole generation that's tired of being used, tired of being lied to, and tired of seeing Africa's wealth benefit everyone except Africans. Of course, it won't be easy. The challenges are huge: armed groups, tight borders, and pressure from every direction. But success isn't always about having it easy. Sometimes it's about stepping up even when the odds are stacked against you. And Traoré has done just that. He's dropped the begging bowl and picked up a blueprint. He's building something that doesn't rely on foreign favours. He's putting up hospitals. He's investing in machines for farmers. He's kicking out anyone trying to hold the country back. And here's the wild part. It's starting to scare the ones who've had it good for too long. You know the type. The presidents who live in marble mansions while their people live with no lights. The ones who jet off to Europe while kids back home sit on classroom floors. They see Traoré's old pickup truck, his simple clothes and his no-frills lifestyle, and suddenly it hits them. That's what real leadership looks like. It's not designer suits and photo ops. It's service. It's sacrifice. It's rolling up your sleeves and doing the hard work, not just smiling for the cameras. And now, people all across Africa are watching. They're asking new questions. If it can happen in Burkina Faso, why not here? Why not us? Traore's actions are dragging old corrupt leaders into the spotlight, and they're squirming. His discipline makes their greed obvious. His courage exposes their fear. His focus on the people is a slap in the face to their selfishness. Some can't sleep at night, haunted by the thought that they could have done better, that they should have done better. But deep down, they know what's missing: heart, honour, a true love for their country. What Traore is doing reminds people of those who came before. Visionaries like Kwame Nkrumah, Patrice Lumumba, and Thomas Sankara. Leaders who believed Africa didn't have to copy the West to succeed. That this land isn't just a playground for outsiders to come and take. It's home to strong, smart, proud people who deserve better. At a big gathering in Russia in 2023, Traore asked a simple question that still hangs in the air. How can a continent this rich, with gold, oil, and endless resources, be the poorest in the world? And honestly, the answer doesn't come from some deep mystery. It's not hiding in some far-off place. It's right in front of us, in the greed of those who were supposed to protect, not plunder. But Burkina Faso is taking a different road. French troops, gone. Unfair deals, cancelled. Foreign powers trying to pull the strings, cut off. Now, instead of shipping raw gold away, they're refining it at home. Instead of waiting for help, they're planting food and building the future with their own hands. This isn't a speech, it's a strategy. This is pan-Africanism for real. Not just words on a stage, but action on the ground. It's about standing tall, making your own way, and lifting others as you go. Picture this. What if every African president earned the same paycheck as a frontline soldier? What if the presidential motorcades vanished and the sound of sirens was replaced by bicycles rolling down clean streets? Imagine if the money used to fuel private jets went instead into building bridges, hospitals, and schools. You walk into any town, there's a well-equipped hospital down the road. Every village has a school with books, desks, and teachers who don't need to strike just to get paid. Trains run from one side of the continent to the other, west to east, Dakar to Dar es Salaam. Real connections, real development. And get this, leaders who are actually afraid of the people. When they mess up, instead of people living in fear of their leaders. That's the kind of shift we're talking about. A total flip of the old script, a new page. Now let's not pretend Burkina Faso is some kind of fairy tale. It's a country still in the thick of a fight, battling insurgents, facing sanctions, and dealing with pressure from all sides. But in the middle of that storm, something bright is burning. It's not about perfect conditions, it's about bold choices. One young captain, in one of the smallest countries on the continent, is staring down powerful forces and refusing to bow. If he can do it, what's stopping the countries swimming in oil money or stacked with diamonds? What's their excuse? Where's their courage? Let's be clear, this isn't a moment for applause from the sidelines. It's a call to action. Traore's humility shouldn't amaze us. It should remind us of what leadership is supposed to look like. The rise of Burkina Faso isn't a solo climb. It's a ladder we should all be climbing together. From coast to coast, from city to village, the era of greedy rulers and golden thrones needs to come to an end. What we need now, leaders who serve, not show off. Builders, not looters. That's why people are looking at Captain Ibrahim Traoré not just as a leader of Burkina Faso, but as a kind of moral compass for the continent. His hands aren't counting stolen cash. They're planting seeds. His fight isn't for power, it's for dignity, for ownership, for a future where Africa stops crawling and starts charging forward. And when you look at those old leaders still clinging to power in marble palaces, terrified of losing their grip, it's not hard to see why they're shaking. Traore's simple truck is louder than their limousines. His service is an accusation. His example is a mirror, showing them everything they chose not to be. And as he builds, the people are watching, and they're starting to ask bigger questions. Not just why is Burkina Faso changing, but why not us too? Because Africa doesn't need more strongmen who steal. That's why what's happening now feels so familiar, and yet so different. It echoes the dreams of the ones who came before. Sankara, Lumumba, Nkrumah. Leaders who saw Africa not as a prize for outsiders, but a home worth defending. Our problem isn't lack of resources, it's the kind of people we've let hold the keys. The sad truth, a lot of our leaders were never leaders. They were gatekeepers for foreign interests. They traded power for privilege and sold out their people for comfort. That's why corruption isn't just a mistake. It's a full-blown attack on Africa's soul. Every stolen dollar is a missing road. Every rigged contract is a broken classroom. Every offshore bank account is a hospital with no medicine and a mother crying in the hallway. The African Union says over $148 billion is lost to corruption every year. That's not just numbers, that's futures vanishing. That's the reason our brightest kids grow up wanting to leave instead of lead. In Nigeria, oil flows like water, but electricity cuts out daily. In Kenya, roads crumble while ghost projects eat up budgets. This isn't just bad planning, it's theft in broad daylight. And the worst part, the very institutions that were supposed to help, like the IMF and World Bank, have turned into loan sharks, promising aid, but tying it to decisions that rob countries of control. You take the money, and suddenly someone in a faraway office decides what you're allowed to build. But the tide is turning. People are fed up, and that's why Captain Traore's rise feels like more than just a new face in charge. It feels like a storm rolling in, because unlike so many who bow to Western powers, he stands with his people. He doesn't ask what the world wants from Africa. He asks what Africans want for themselves. He's not the kind of leader who hides behind gates or wears fancy suits that cost more than some families earn in a year. You won't find him sitting on a golden chair or giving orders from behind a glass desk. Instead, Captain Ibrahim Traoré wears army boots and dusty fatigues. He walks among everyday people, not just waving from a distance, but talking, listening, and actually speaking their language. Literally. He doesn't pretend to understand the struggle. He lives it. When he says he wants to pull his people out of misery, it's not just a clever line for headlines. It's a real goal. And he's chasing it with everything he's got. In Burkina Faso, his government isn't just sitting around waiting for the world to fix things. They've brought communities together, building strong ties between regular folks and the military to push back against threats. Locals aren't being left on the sidelines. They're being trained, trusted, and empowered to defend their land. Food has become another battleground. Traoré isn't begging for foreign grain or imported handouts. He's pushing the country to grow its own food, depend on its own farmers, and cut ties with outsiders who've made a habit of profiting off Africa's struggles. Of course, none of this is picture perfect. Critics have raised concerns. Some question how power is being handled. Others point to the slow return to democracy. And sure, those questions matter. But let's talk about what's real. What kind of democracy do you have when kids go to bed hungry? What good is freedom when people can't afford medicine or walk safely down the street? Traoré's methods might not look like the polished plans that come from think tanks or global conferences, but they weren't designed in boardrooms. They were built on the ground, out of urgency, not ambition. Then came January 7th, 2025. Ghana was hosting the inauguration of President John Mahama. The world showed up, suits and speeches ready, but when Captain Traoré stepped onto the stage in Accra's Black Star Square, wearing his usual military gear and with a sidearm on his hip, the entire vibe changed. The crowd didn't see him as just another official visitor. The cheers that erupted weren't for a name on a guest list. They were for a symbol. They saw him and thought, here's someone different. Someone who's not chasing clout, not chasing cash, just chasing change. And it hit even harder in Ghana, a place where people still remember the fire of Kwame Nkrumah, the leader who once believed Africa could rise on its own terms. That moment in Accra wasn't random. It had been building for months. All over the internet, across timelines in Lagos, Nairobi, Johannesburg and Dakar, young Africans have been watching Traoré, and not with side-eye or sarcasm, but with real hope. Some call him a modern-day Sankara, the bold revolutionary, who once dared to challenge everything, and paid for it with his life. The same Sankara who, just like Traoré, took power at 34, talked of local solutions and made outsiders nervous. And now, here we are again, but this time Traoré is being called the blueprint, a walking example of what leadership could be if it weren't soaked in greed or shaped by foreign demands. When Captain Ibrahim Traoré showed up in Ghana, he wasn't just another leader in the crowd. His presence felt different, like a quiet reminder that real leadership isn't about flying first class or living in palaces. It's about serving people. It's about stepping down from the stage and walking beside the ones who put you there in the first place. And that message, it hit home. If other African leaders were paying attention, They would have seen more than just a man in military gear. They would have seen a wake-up call. Because here's the truth. Being in charge doesn't mean you get to sit above everyone. It means you're the first to carry the weight. And it definitely doesn't mean you get to protect your rich friends while the poor starve. If someone steals from the country, they should face the law. No more covering up, no more turning a blind eye. Africa's been stuck in this pattern for way too long. Leaders borrowing money they don't need, selling off the land's riches to big companies overseas, all while schools fall apart and hospitals run dry. Why? Because the old system was never built for the people. It was built to keep Africa dependent, always asking, always waiting, always falling in line. But something's changing. People are awake now. They see the lies for what they are. They're done watching leaders cruise past in shiny convoys while they walk miles for clean water. They're tired of being told to wait while the same hands keep grabbing more. That's why Traore is not just a name trending online. He's become a symbol, a kind of mirror, showing what's possible if a leader decides to actually serve instead of take. And no, he's not perfect. He's made tough choices, that's some question. But one thing's clear, he's not afraid to do things differently. He's open about where the country's money goes. He's not signing secret deals with foreign businesses. He's using what Burkina Faso has, its gold, its land, its people, to build something from the inside out. This is what leadership should look like. No more backroom deals that leave citizens broke and billionaires richer. No more five-star hotels paid for while kids sit on dirt floors in classrooms. That money should be building hospitals, creating jobs, and feeding families, not building luxury homes for people already living large. And let's talk about this lie that corruption is too deep to fix. Nope, it's only deep because those in power let it grow. Traore is showing that when there's real political will, when a leader wants to do the right thing, things can actually change. He's also calling out the old game played by places like the IMF and World Bank. Those fancy institutions have kept African countries locked into deals that never work in the people's favour. Countries end up selling off their own future just to pay back loans they didn't even need, loans that only became necessary because their wealth was stolen in the first place. So now Traore is saying, we don't need to play that game anymore. We can build our own future without begging. We can trade, yes, but on our own terms. Not as beggars, but as equals. The gold in Burkina Faso, the oil in Nigeria, the cobalt in Congo. It doesn't belong to investors in Europe or CEOs in America. It belongs to the people living on the land. Full stop. And let's be real. Independence isn't just about waving a flag. It's about feeding yourself. It's about building your own stuff. Traore is pushing for that too. Grow your own food, make your own clothes, build your own systems. It sounds simple, but it's powerful. He's not the first with this idea either. Julius Nyerere of Tanzania said the same thing years ago, but too many leaders ignored that wisdom, and now their countries import billions of dollars in food while their own farms sit empty. That has to stop. Africa can feed itself, and it should. But here's the most important part. Leaders need to start listening to the youth. Africa's not an old continent. The average person is just 19 years old. But most of the people in charge are in their 60s, 70s, even 80s, clinging to power like it's a family heirloom. Meanwhile, the youth are marching, protesting, demanding change. Not because they want chaos, but because they want a future. In Senegal, they're in the streets. In Kenya, they're speaking out. In Ghana, they're cheering for Traore like he's carrying their hopes on his shoulders. And leaders? They have a choice. They can join this energy and help shape something better, or they can stand in the way and be swept aside. No doubt Traore's journey is risky. His country is still under pressure. Parts of it are controlled by dangerous groups. His alliances with Russia and others outside the West make some people nervous. And yes, people are watching to see when, or if, he'll hand power over to civilians. But none of that takes away from what he's trying to do. In fact, it makes it even more clear how bold the effort really is. He's not asking Africa to copy every move he makes. He's just showing what courage looks like in action. The courage to stop making excuses. The courage to challenge old systems. The courage to stand up when it's easier to sit down. That cheer for Traore in Ghana, that wasn't about one man. That was about an idea. An idea that's moving from the dusty towns of the Sahel to the crowded streets by the coast. If you found this video interesting and would love to watch more videos like this, be sure to hit that like button and don't forget to subscribe.